Hello everybody, welcome to the Game of Thrones edition of Fantasy or Prehistory. I'm Joe Lyon-Layden, and what I got for you today is spoilers and theories from the books, the series, the leaked scenes and slips and interviews. What I don't have for you are stills from the series or clips from the series. It's just me, myself, and I, so be forewarned and let's get to it. A lot of people have been asking, why is Bran so cold to Sansa, to Arya, to Meera Reed? To answer this question, we need to go back to episode 3 and the Bran and Sansa reunion. Bran freaks Sansa out a little bit when he tells her, "It was so beautiful that night, and you were so beautiful. I'm sorry it had to happen here. I'm sorry it had to happen to you." And he's talking about her wedding to Ramsay. Now he says, "I'm sorry it had to happen," not "I'm sorry it happened." And he says, "had to happen" twice, which implies some kind of purpose to Sansa's wedding to Ramsay. And why is he watching her wedding to Ramsay? Mostly the things that Bran has seen in his visions are of major importance to the larger story. So this wedding must have some kind of a larger importance. I made a video about my theory on Bran's time travel at the end of season 6, after the Hodor reveal and death scene. Since then, I've learned that there have been other community people who have come up with a similar theory, and word has even gotten to the actor who plays Bran Stark, because he mentioned it in one of the interviews. The theory is that all of the Bran Starks we hear from Old Nan and from the stories and the histories of Westeros are the same Bran. And he is being reincarnated over and over again to accomplish a specific task. Some of these Brans have lived long enough to inherit the duties of the previous three-eyed crow and inherit his powers. They were all themselves former incarnations of Bran Stark, who learned from a predecessor to use the weirwood net and see the past and the future. Brandon the Builder, Brandon the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and many other Brandon Starks have been reincarnations of the same Brandon Stark who built the wall and probably started Clan Stark. I think that he's trying to correct a mistake he made during the Long Night, and that the Night's King is actually one of the incarnations of Bran gone wrong. We've got major confirmation of some of these ideas in the last 2 episodes. When Bran tells Sansa that the three-eyed raven taught him to see the visions, but also that he is the three-eyed raven, he's telling the truth literally. Because Brendans can be reincarnations of Bran too, especially if a Brendan has Stark blood. If you're a book reader, you know that the three-eyed raven that Bran meets in the cave is Brandon Rivers, one of the great bastards who took part in the Blackfire Rebellion. Brendan was the son of a Targaryen king and a woman of House Blackwater. Now this house is in the far north of the Riverlands and has a history of marrying Starks, with at least one confirmed marriage between the two houses and many Stark first names in their lineage, such as Robb and Bran and Brendan. So it's probable that Brendan Rivers was one of the many incarnations of Bran. There has likely been a history of Brans passing down their knowledge to the next Bran for a long time, and that tradition may have been broken by the Night's King when he abandoned the original cause and chose to lead the White Walkers instead. Since that time, or at least since the time of Brendan Rivers, Brandon Starks have had a horrible habit of dying before they reach adulthood to become the green seers they were meant to be. In fact, the last one was burned by the Mad King, which is part of what started off Robert's rebellion. So it's very possible that the reason that the three-eyed raven led Bran to the abandoned watchtower at the beginning of the series was because he actually wanted Bran to become crippled, so that he wouldn't be able to join Robb's war and die before his prime and before he ever got to meet the previous three-eyed raven. We get further confirmation of this in episode 4 when Bran tells Meera that he's not really Bran Stark. that he remembers being Bran Stark, but he remembers so much more since he became the Three-Eyed Raven. This is why he's being so cold. He's not only Sansa's and Arya's brother, he is also their earliest ancestor that anybody can remember. So he doesn't feel more connected to them than any of the other hundreds of thousands of Stark brothers and sisters that he's had over the past 2,000 to 10,000 years. And he's been seeing them and being connected to them since they were born, because he's been watching it all and even sending them messages through visions. He doesn't feel the relief of seeing them again like Sansa and Arya do, because his visions are no less real than what his body experiences. He's been with them all along, and it's hard to be excited about something you've seen and done 1,000 times. Sansa and Arya and even Jon are mere mortals to Bran, and their concerns are trivial compared to the big picture that only he can see. Some of you may be saying, but wait, I thought the Children of the Forest created the Night's King and the White Walkers, because we saw a scene of that in a previous season. Well, it seems from Dany and Jon's conversation underneath Dragonstone that the White Walkers have been around long before the Children of the Forest began fighting against men. In fact, they may not have begun fighting men until the Andals invaded, which may have been thousands of years after the first man first came to Westeros. Maybe what we saw in the scene with the Children of the Forest planting that dragon glass in the heart of a human was not the birth of White Walkers, but the birth of the Night's King, a first man named Brandon Stark. There is indication from legend in the Song of Ice and Fire books that many heroes of legend were saved from zombification or grayscale or drowning by the kiss of what I like to call the fairy folk. This includes Children of the Forest, the female White Walkers we have never seen but heard about in myths, and various creatures of the sea or water such as the merfolk and squishers of Westerosi folktale. I've done a series of videos entitled Is Game of Thrones Prehistoric Fiction?, wherein I discuss the connection between these creatures and the legendary heroes they saved and transformed. But the gist of the idea is this. Perhaps a former incarnation of Bran was saved from White Walker infection by the Children of the Forest, but unlike Benjen Stark and many other legendary heroes of myth who continued to fight on the side of humans after receiving a similar gift, this particular Bran chose the side of the White Walkers, and he decided that the only way to save the world would be the utter destruction of mankind. The kiss that the Drowned God, the Salt King, the last hero in the Drowned God, or the Grey King, give or receive wasn't actually a literal kiss, but the obsidian implant that allows consciousness to remain inside a body even after ice has taken the flesh. All this goes back to the fact that humans are receiving visions from an unknown source throughout the Game of Thrones books, and George Martin has a long history of using this idea in his previous science fiction. In many of his stories, man is a sort of disease, at odds with the rest of the universe, because he's developed an ego and free will, whereas most other organisms act in the interest of a collective mind or universal consciousness governed by the universe. So man is at war with his very environment, the universe itself. The alien intelligences the ones who oppose mankind in these stories often send psychic visions to humans in order to bring about their destruction. Preston Jacobs has an excellent series of videos on this called The Minds of Wolves and Robins, so there's no reason for me to get in depth with it now. But I do want to speak for a moment about episode 3 in this series, which includes the evidence of Ramsay Bolton receiving the same visions that Bran and Jojen received concerning Theon's capture of Winterfell. Though Ramsay is known only to hunt with dogs, he was found in the Hornwood on a hunt with the original Reek, not Theon, the one who preceded Theon in the position and was killed in Clash of Kings. It's common knowledge that a battle is taking place in the Hornwood at this time. It can't have escaped Ramsay's notice, but Ramsay decides to go hunting in it anyway. When the Stark forces find Ramsay, he has already switched clothes with Reek, so that the two would be mistaken for one another. And these aren't just hunting clothes, but some of Ramsay's finest garments, not something that you go hunting in. No one mentions that Ramsay stinks, although Reek is impersonating him and is known to smell horrible. The only explanation for all this is that Ramsay had the original Reek take a bath before they went hunting because he planned to get captured by the Starks. But getting captured by the Starks makes no sense unless Ramsay somehow knew that the Iron Men were about to take Winterfell. He spends his time in a cell until Theon gets there, and then his plan takes shape. Later on, when Theon sets out on a search for Bran and Rickon, there is no question that the boys will be found, as they've only just left and are on foot. Nobody's even worried about it. But somehow Ramsay knows the boys will not be found, because he stuffs a bag full of Brandon and Rickon's clothes before they ever leave Winterfell, and is later the one to suggest killing the Miller boys and dressing them up. So this gives us a clue as to why Ramsay and Sansa's marriage had to happen. Someone is trying to bring ice and ice together instead of ice and fire. You see, the Boltons, like the Starks, are descended from first men and were equal kings of the North at one time. They were called the Red Kings and once wore the skins of Starks as trophies, ruling over the part of the eastern half of the North that the Starks now own. Their kingdom was ceded to the Starks after a Red King's defeat, and the Boltons swore fealty to House Stark in order to oppose the Andals and save the North. Bolton wards were sent to Winterfell, which could be a hint that a marriage or a bastard between the two houses may have taken place at some time in the past. Remember, we also have several hints in the TV series indicating that Sansa might be pregnant right now. Not only is our second great villain of A Song of Ice and Fire, Ramsay Bolton, receiving visions from either the Night's King or the Three-Eyed Raven, but so was our first great villain, Joffrey. The show alludes to this twice with quick cutscenes of Joffrey's eyes being almost supernaturally blue. The actor who plays Joffrey in Braavos also exhibits these strangely luminous blue eyes when he enacts the Boy King's death by poison, and he may have gotten another hint of Joffrey's dream-induced insanity in this last episode. Littlefinger must have given Bran the dagger, cat's paw, for a reason, just as Sansa says. To me, this seems like a big indication that Littlefinger had nothing to do with the assassination attempt on Bran's life. He gave the dagger to Bran to absolve himself, but also to direct Bran's attention to the enemy behind the assassination attempt. Someone very wealthy, as Bran says. The first guess might be Cersei and Jaime, because they certainly had a motive by not wanting Bran to divulge their secret romance in the Tower. Previously, Littlefinger involved Tyrion, telling Catelyn that the dwarf won the dagger from him in a bet. But there's also been a lot of community speculation about Joffrey being the one who hired the killer, being young and dumb enough to steal Tyrion's dagger and try to cover up the trail in that manner. A lot of people have pointed out that he overhears either the Hound or someone else saying that it would be a mercy for the boy to die, and he's a little shit, so of course there's speculation. But Joffrey was already angry at his uncle Tyrion at the party in Winterfell, right before the attempt happened. If we have two Brandon Starks at odds with one another, each fighting for a different cause and each with the ability to send visions to human beings, this makes perfect sense. Of course, Joffrey's visions would get stronger the closer he got to the Wall and to the land of always winter. The Three-Eyed Raven incarnation of Bran wants our current Bran to inherit the mantle of Three-Eyed Raven, but the Night King incarnation of Bran wants our current Bran to die like all of the other Brans. That way he can continue to live forever in White Walker form with no successor and eventually bring about the end of mankind itself. At the end of last season, I did a video concerning Euron Greyjoy's pact with the White Walkers. Euron also seems to know things he shouldn't, such as the perfect time to meet his brother on a bridge, the perfect time to return to Pike to seek the throne, the whereabouts of Asha Greyjoy's fleet, and he's able to sneak through that fleet in perfect silence and ram the lead ship with his own completely undetected. When he strikes, it's always during a storm, as if he is the storm, just as he told his brother. In the books, his use of omens and magic are more in the forefront, and he has imprisoned warlocks for their knowledge. He drinks Shade of the Evening to enhance his own magical powers, and possesses a legendary horn said to either bring down the wall and slay dragons or do both. Most of these things have not been introduced in the television series yet, but I think a few of them will be before the end of this season, and Euron's atrocities will grow to epic proportions in the beginning of Season 8. The story of Euron's rebirth at sea when he tied himself to the mast during the storm and afterwards cut all of his men's tongues out parallels many of the stories of heroes in the past who were saved by, once again, some form of fairy folk, and also in our own legends of Odysseus and the sirens of the Enchanted Isles. Something from beyond the knowledge of men spoke to Euron or saved him in that storm and turned him into a vassal of the Night's King, the Great Other, and/or the Drowned God, the Stranger. A lot of readers have given up hope of Euron's horn showing up in the television series, but I think it can still happen and probably will. I see the warlocks from the House of the Undying being introduced again very soon, seeking revenge on the Dragon Queen by joining Cersei's side via Euron and presenting the magic horn as a gift. Euron will accept, but just as in the books, he will enslave and torture those warlocks for their knowledge. This should escalate him to Joffrey Ramsay level hatred pretty quickly, along with the other depraved things he's about to do. Remember, in the shows, Pious Pre may have been killed by Dany, but we haven't seen any of the other warlocks yet. There may be more. My reasons for believing that each of the arch-villains in the series are being led by the Night's King or the Great Other are not only because of foreshadowing and the Easter eggs, but because of the aesthetics of the story itself. At present, the White Walkers are a vague threat that nobody really hates. We just think they're kind of scary. But a great writer knows that his villain is just as important as his protagonist. So right under our very nose, Martin has been defining his antagonist, while at the same time misleading us in the understanding of their nature in order to maintain the White Walkers' ominous mystery throughout. We've been getting to know the White Walkers all along through Joffrey, Ramsay, and very soon, Euron Greyjoy. From a literary perspective, there's very little chance that those three guys, the most hated villains in our story, were just douchebags we happened to meet along the way. They are of such importance to the drama that they also must be important to the greater plot. The last great villain has to reveal this, and also has to explain to the audience the reason for the White Walkers' invasion. Another reason for this theory is that I knew the Hobbit reference crossbows weren't going to be enough to provide a serious challenge to the dragons. They're a threat, but now Dany knows about them, she's going to do something about them. Neither is the Golden Company. The bad guys need more power to make the struggle between the two queens more interesting, especially now that the Jon and Dany alliance is formed. Capturing a dragon would do just the trick. What does Littlefinger fear? That's another big question that people have been asking. Because in episode 3, the new Maester of Winterfell mentions to Sansa that Maester Luwin kept records of every raven, and this seems to worry Littlefinger. My guess is that it's the original letter that started the whole war, sent by Lysair into Catelyn to let her know that her husband was murdered by the Lannisters. Now Sansa already knows that Lysa killed her own husband, because she confesses it in the Eyrie when she tries to throw Sansa through the moon door. A rereading of Game of Thrones Chapter 1 shows that there may have been something in the letter that Catelyn did not tell Ned before she burned it. But it does implicate Littlefinger in the scheme, and then Sansa would know that Jon Arryn was killed by both Littlefinger and Lysa, and that they sought to dupe her own parents. That's bad. Now, if you're interested in Catelyn's strange actions when that letter arrives, and a greater plot that she may have been involved in, I recommend the series of videos called Why Catelyn Sucks, Part 1 through 3, by another YouTuber. Catelyn seems to have engineered Jon's being sent to the wall in order to protect her children. The only reason for this would be that she believes that Jon has a better claim to Winterfell than her own, or might become a challenger in the future. This is probably not because she knows R plus L equals J, but there's good evidence that Ned may have been married to Ashara Dane before being wedded to Catelyn. The powers that be annulled the marriage because the union between Starks and Tullys had been promised. The intended groom had been killed by the Mad King, and the Danes had suffered disgrace by being on the losing side of the war, so it was no problem to cancel out that marriage for the sake of the Tullys and the Starks. Now, we may have a busted fan theory in this episode too, because photos were leaked of Arya with the dagger cat's paw. Many have speculated that Arya obtained the dagger by killing Littlefinger when he's caught betraying the Starks in some way. Though it will happen a little different than theorized, I think it's still possible. There's another leak showing Arya with a knife to Littlefinger's throat. If you're wondering about the worried look Sansa and Littlefinger exchange when Arya is fighting Brienne in Season 4, it's likely because Sansa fears that she is on Arya's list and sees that her personal guard may not even be able to save her from her sister. Now this will likely come to nothing between the two. I think that Arya has long since taken Sansa off of her list, but Sansa feels guilty for playing a part in the death of Arya's friend and the loss of Nymeria at the Crosswaters. Arya is also the only Stark who knows that Sansa lied about her father being a traitor in court in order to save her marriage to Joffrey. I think the writers will play this drama up and that Littlefinger will try to inflame suspicions, but in the end they will catch him and he will be the one to lose, bringing Arya and Sansa closer together in the eyes of the audience, to everyone's relief, because they'll come together to accuse him and probably execute him. Switching gears to Dragonstone for a minute now, did anybody catch Davos's reply to Jon when he speaks about having less men in the north? Davos comments, fewer. This is the same comment Stannis made to Davos in the first season when Davos uses the same incorrect grammar. This showed Stannis to be very meticulous, and I dare say a bit anal, because the dramatic difference between less and fewer is quite nitpicky. But coming from Davos's lips, it shows growth of character and increased understanding of the world around him, as well as a remembrance of his past roles and his mistakes, and of course, his friend Stannis. But one thing no one has really asked is, why is there so much dragonglass at Dragonstone? It was there before the Targaryens. How about the dragon carvings? If dragonglass comes from dragons, then some of those stone statues may not be carvings at all. Remember that Azor Ahai is supposed to awaken dragons from stone, and this could be literal. If Euron or the Night's King get their hands on one of Dany's dragons, then we're probably going to need more dragons for the climax and grand finale of the book and series. And we all know now that ice dragons are real because of the World of Ice and Fire books and the Martin Silmarillion. And we know that one might well be sleeping under Winterfell and simply resting in a cold pool form in its godwood. I've also seen a great video by the community which puts forth the theory that Jorah and Sam are the key to saving Westeros from zombification. Sam was told 3 or 4 times that grayscale is easy to cure in children but nearly impossible in adults. In my Is a Game of Thrones prehistoric fiction series, I've detailed the similarities between grayscale victims, the stone men, and the zombies of the White Walkers, as well as parallels between the myths concerning the two. Could vaccination of the children of Westeros against grayscale also work against the powers of White Walkers? Could being vaccinated for grayscale keep someone dead and unanimated despite the magic of the Night's King? Could it even cause infants to resist being changed into an actual White Walker? If this is the case, then Jorah is the key to its discovery. Those who have seen the leaks know that Jorah is going beyond the wall with Jon and the Brotherhood without banners, ostensibly to retrieve proof that the White Walkers exist. I think somehow Jorah is going to resist being turned into either a White Walker or a zombie because of his brush with grayscale. Notice we see him also in leaks of a meeting in the King's Landing arena, presumably well after this expedition beyond the wall takes place. I want to sum up with the last scene from episode 4. What will happen to Jaime and Bronn? That water Jaime was sinking into looked awfully deep at the end of the program, being that he was so close to the shore. He didn't even look to be trying to swim. Now, of course, he's probably in a state of shock, thinking a second before that his life was over due to dragon breath and heroism, and he'd likely just gotten his wind knocked out when Bronn tackled him into the water. But mostly, I think the sinking scene was for dramatic effect, to emphasize the cliffhanger ending. I think they'll both be captured. We'll get some banter between Jaime and Bronn, with Jaime accusing the mercenary of caring about him after all, whereupon Bronn will use the excuse that he lost his bag of gold in the battle and needs the Lannister to pay his debts again. But ultimately, I think Bronn is going over to Dany's side by the end of the season. After all, he was Tyrion's bodyguard and friend first, and is a practical man. Jaime's not going to be able to say shit about it because he just saved his life. Jaimie, on the other hand, has gone through yet another rebirth in this drowning scene and the scene with the Queen of Thorns. He is questioning the rationality of his own love for Cersei at the moment, and when Dany lets him go to deliver his sister a message, he will doubt it even more. This will put him back in the perfect position to become the Valonqar and save Westeros from his sister. Notice in the previews of the next episode we did not see Bran or Jaimie with Tyrion when he's offering to spare the men of Cersei's army and asking them to come over to his side, as well as the Tullys. Well, that's probably because they're in chains somewhere. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button if you got anything out of those speculations, and I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. We've got much more going on in the weeks to come.